Hi, I'm Phil Ollie, and today I'm going to talk about overcoming the interference barrier. Have you ever been to a seminar, a training course, or read a book, or set a resolution, and then just not done it, not followed up on what you know? Have you ever been in a meeting and detailed and decided on a course of action, and then just not done it? Have you ever thought, right, I'm going to have my best month ever, whether that be in sales or whatever field you're in, and then it just doesn't happen, or even if it does happen for a short time, it's not sustained? Well, if you've had that frustration of knowing what you could do to become more successful and just not doing it, don't worry, you're not alone. Because failing to implement is endemic. It's in businesses, it's in teams, it's in organisations, and it's in individuals. It impacts our lives in so many ways: our business, our career, our personal lives, our relationships, our fitness, our health. It is like a virus. I call it the Fti virus. Fti standing for failure to implement. And it's a result of what I call interference. Because, the vast majority of people know what they could be doing and should be doing in order to get more success, get better results, improve their performance. And yet so few people are then able to translate that knowledge into action. This barrier that exists between translating the knowledge into the action is called interference. So it comes from a kind of self-doubt. It's internal. There are two facets to it, in fact. The internal part is, I call fuzz. It's that self-doubt. It's that lack of clarity. It's that lack of focus, that lack of belief, that fear, that inner image of ourselves not being as good as we can be. And that creates distraction, procrastination, deflection, and ultimately inaction. And it also comes from buzz, the external interference. Now, external interference is an interesting thing. It's not people getting in your way. It's more a situation where, for example, you say you're going to do something, you're going to achieve something. You might say, I'm going to go to the gym 3 times a week all this year. And someone gives you that look, that askance glance, as I call it. And that askance glance simply is a raised eyebrow. They don't even need to raise their eyebrow. You might say, get back from a conference, say, I'm going to have my best business month ever or my best sales month ever. And standing around the water cooler when you say that, 2 or 3 people might just look at you as if to say, yeah, you've said that before. And you'll internalise that interference through that askance glance. So the fuzz and the buzz create this barrier to action called interference. Years ago, I remember walking into a garage for my car to get its annual MOT. And as I walked into the garage, I heard the radio playing in the background, and the mechanics were all there tinkering around under car engines and so on and so forth. And I thought, is it only me who can hear that high-pitched whistle as if the radio was slightly out of tune? And I said to one of the mechanics, can you hear that whistle? How do you put up with that radio being slightly out of tune? And he said, it's not out of tune, is it? We haven't noticed it. And of course, they got used to that ambient interference. And in the same way, our version of interference, that barrier between knowing what to do and taking action, becomes ambient. It becomes the norm. That self-doubt becomes part of our identity. And it can have an impact in so many ways. I know, for example, that only 3% of people write an action plan every morning, outlining exactly what they're going to achieve that day. And yet, I bet if I said to people, how many of you know what an action plan is? The vast majority would know. Probably 100% of people would know. By the way, an action plan is not necessarily a to-do list. But it also gets in the way, interference of making the requisite number of sales calls. If you're a salesperson, that's where I first came across this idea. It gets in the way of getting fit and eating healthy. It gets in the way of leaders being strategic enough. It gets in the way of communicating with our life partners in the way that we would want to. There are all sorts of ways in which this interference barrier has an impact. So how do we overcome it? Well, the first thing is to recognize it for what it is. Recognize the fear, recognize the self-doubt. The second thing is to recognize also that motivation is not enough to overcome it, because it will soon wane, that motivation. You'll get motivated to do something new, and then that will wane. We all know how that works. We all know how that works with things like setting resolutions. But the interference barrier exists purely in our unconscious, in our subconscious mind, where all the power is. And so in order to break through that barrier, in order to make sure that we turn our knowledge of what we could do into action, we have to work at an unconscious level by reprogramming what we believe about ourselves and about what our capabilities are. And that takes a number of techniques we can use for that. Some of the techniques that I use on visualization, for example, will easily break through that barrier. And the third element, as well as recognizing it, as well as reprogramming the subconscious, the third element to making sure that we move effortlessly from knowing what we can do to be more successful to taking action is habits. Our habits are crucial. We default to our habits all the time. So imagine if even 30% of the barrier could be removed. Imagine if even 50% of the barrier could be removed. And imagine if 70% of the barrier could be removed. Imagine what your life, your business, your career, your relationships, your health, your overall happiness and fulfillment would be like if the barrier was removed 90% or perhaps even entirely. How much more effective would you be in your life to be able to move effortlessly from knowledge to action? And imagine that knowledge turning into action, that action turning into results, and those results turning into the success, happiness, and fulfillment of your true potential. I wish you every success in overcoming your interference.